techniques. Okay, let's take it away. Thank you, Dave.
Okay, I just made a box. Ta-da! Yeah, how many sides are on a real box?
Well, I can do that really easy in Blender.
Well, I just did it here, real easy too. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is give you a little quiz. First of all, who's done UV mapping?
Begrudgingly.
Okay. For those who have done UV mapping, what are valid dimensions for a UV image? Correct answer, any. Any image, no matter what dimensions. It could be 1 by a million. It works. Yeah. The only caveat is it has to be at least 1 pixel in each direction. So if you make one that doesn't have at least 1 pixel, you're doing something really weird. So yeah, a lot of people think that a UV map has to be, like perfectly square image all the time. It doesn't. It can be anything because the UV coordinates are actually percentages of the image. So you see this little grid here. That's just for reference. Your UV textures don't actually have to be in here either, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But first of all, I'm just going to make up a quick UV map for this box. I'll go over to Map, Make UVs, and go to our good friend Atlas, and Create. So now I've got 6 squares. You can see each face as I select it. Now I'm going to do a little bit of surfacing right here in this window. So I'm going to go to my surface editor. Going to load up an image. I'm going to change my content directory first. I'm looking in the wrong folder. Okay, load image. Let's see. Miscellaneous. I'm just going to load up a black dot. So there we go. Now this is being planar map, so you only see the black dot on that side and that side. If I automatic size the thing, now I've got, basically a nice little dice you don't want to use in Vegas. And I'm going to change my mapping to UV. Select the UV texture I just created. And you're not going to see anything except on one face. And that's this guy right here where the dot is. Now you can actually show the image right in this little display here. And I don't know if you can see the highlighted wireframe, but I've highlighted that one little polygon there. And I'm going to turn that off so I can see what I'm doing. Now remember, we got a little dot that's filling up these 4 squares. So I'm just going to take I'll just grab the points. I'm going to make all these squares fill the entire window. So I'll pull all those over. You just notice I stretch my little point. Grab all these and stretch them out to the other side. So now the UVs are going from 0 to 1. And I'm going to do that with these points. To 0. And pull these guys up to 1. So now every face fills the entire UV space here. now I have a dot on every side, just like I would if I did cubic mapping, which essentially does the exact same thing here. Now, what if I wanted to have, it's like 9 dots on each side? I go back to my surface editor and yeah, there's no tiling information. Scale doesn't do anything because that's all turned off. So, what would be a solution for increasing the number of dots per face?
Well, you can use a different map.
Yeah? That means I have to go into Photoshop and make a new map.
Yeah.
I don't like doing that. I like to let the computer do the work for me. So I'm going to go into the center of this UV map. And remember, I said, this is just a little reference in this area. Your UVs continue off in all directions. So I'm going to go to the center at 50, 50, 50, and I'm just going to scale this up. Now I've got 9 per face. 16 or 25 or whatever that was. I can put in as many as I want just by scaling that UV up. And the reason that's working is, so I've opened up the texture editor again. You have these little repeat things. They actually work on UV maps. I'm going to replace that image with something else.
Hey Dave, would it be possible to animate what you just did in terms of resizing that UV?
Not yet.
Okay.
It'd be nice, but it's not going to work for a little while yet.
Okay.
I'm just going to pick, let's see.
Yeah. But Dave's too lazy to do that.
Yeah, I'll let the computer do the work for me. Okay, so let's load a better image. No, need a better one. Okay, that'll work. So I got this weird Christmas present. But these actually work. I can repeat or mirror the textures in the UV space as well. And again, it works as, increase the size of this thing. Or I can just do edge and just get the one image and then continue the edge along. Just like regular planar mapping, these buttons all work the same way. So that leads us to an interesting little trick that you can do. Going to load up a little image here. That's all procedurally done. There's no images used in this. These little screws are all UV mapped. It's just the same screw over and over. And I'll show you how you UV map along a path like that. Okay, clear this out. Go back to top view. I'm going to grab a couple splines. I would use that plugin that Ken was showing a couple months ago for automatically splining these things, but I forget where it was. It's got multiply, rail extrude. I want better rails or better extrusion. and more. That's better. I only want the top geometry and get rid of the 2-point polygons along the edge. I don't need those. Flip. Okay, going to do the same thing with this. Go back to UV texture, map, make UVs. This just sets up the UV map initially. I just do planar. So right now it kind of sucks. It's not doing anything like what I want. First thing I'm going to do is go back over here and bring up my little dot texture, which you don't see. Now, an easier way of doing this little UV is I'm just going to select the first 2 polygons here, and there's a little tool called UV Spider. Just select the texture you want, say the direction you want it to go, and there we go. And there's my dot sitting way up here in the middle. Now I want to get that thing to repeat, so again I'm going to go in here and stretch the UV just in the one direction. I got a problem here. I've turned off my repeat, so let's turn that back on again. And I just scale this thing until I see these little dots are actually looking round. And if I've got a little problem where, you know, some of the geometry is a little bit squashed, like up in here, I'll just select that section of the geometry, find it in here, zoom in, and just start scaling it from that point. Just to try to keep those dots looking fairly round. I'm probably a little bit off here because my monitor's got everything stretched vertically. But this is basically how I did all the rivets on that plane. It's just setting up a UV around every window frame and doing this. So am I actually
work with shapes that are made with splines?
Oh, it'll work with any geometry. Like UV Spider will select 2 points and it'll find all the polygons that are in that same band and UV map from those first 2 polygons. There's also UV Road, which does a similar thing. It's a little bit weird. And Ken was showing a really cool plugin a couple months ago, UV Creeper, which will actually do this, but it'll do it on multiple bands, and it'll keep the spacing proportionate too. Yeah, UV Spider, spaces everything evenly. So I'm going to load in the ball turret. Let's go back to content directory for that. So there's the ball turret. You can see the little dot that I'm using for the texture reference in here. I'll select just any one of these little bands. You can actually see how each frame is done. It's a little bit separate. I'll go down to one of these circular frames. Copy him over to another layer. So there's the UV texture, the interior, some seals for where the window glass goes. And that's the ball turret window trim. So I'll pull up the surface for that. Ball turret window trim. So that's what I was using to set up that texture. I also have another texture that I've used for various things that I also use just to get a better idea how the texture is being deformed. And this will actually show you where I've sliced my UVs a little bit. Now, that little line there indicates that this section is completely separate from this little section, which is different from this, and this, and this. Turn that off. It's just so I can position these rivets or screws a little bit easier on their own without screwing anything else up. So I'm going to go back to the UV map for this.
So is that one or two UV maps?
It's one that's showing there. Let me pull this up here. That's not it. Okay, where isn't it showing? Oh, there it is. That's why it wasn't showing up. There's my little grid, but my UV textures are way out here. The reason they're out here is because I've actually got a bunch of them on the ball itself. And these are a few little stray things that shouldn't be happening, but it just shows them anyway. So zoom back in here. Select that little section, and that's my curved section there. My corners are over here. So I can take any one of these things and just move it around. And I'll keep watching down here. Every time I move it like a full 1 meter, it basically lines up to where it was before. So you see a little dot moving across in the textured view. Well, here's its tile, then the next tile, and the next tile, next tile. So by doing it this way, I can actually position that tile, anywhere I want in that little area. So if I want to put it right in the corner, I can do that. If I want a bigger one or smaller one, I can scale it up or down. I can rotate this and try to fit 2 of them in there. And again, these are just being used for reference or positioning purposes only. That texture never actually renders, because if you look at the surface again, I've got nodes. Now this will look a little bit scary at first. I'm not sure why, but the real work being done in here is a couple IFW textures.
And the IFW textures are procedural?
Yeah. I'm using one called rivets, which does basically it just puts in random rivets on a grid, but it lets you UV map them, so they're going to follow the same thing that my little test image is doing. But they have little options where I can put little diagonals through there, so I can have them turn into screws. Each one be randomly rotated, so it's how I can get all these little screws in all different spots. This is just working on the bump, sculpting the profile of the bump itself. Because normally these things just kind of like a 45-degree bevel, and this just converts it into a rounded shape. So if we go back to the image of the ball turret, You see these guys are rounded. These guys are flat, so they're doing something different. And similar things are going on with the other textures here. But most of this is all just procedural stuff being rendered over top. Let's see.
Like all your grid and all that all follows the same UV.
If I'm using a 2D version of it, yeah. But you know, for grittins, I don't have to worry about it tiling. I'm just going to like throw it on, so it's all pretty much 3D. Yeah, on this surface here, the only thing that's being UV mapped is the IFW rivets here. So that's doing the majority of the work. So you can also do a similar method for doing a road. Pull this up. Instead of using a round dot, I can just put a little square and stretch that square out using that same idea, just stretching the UVs, and I'll just have a nice little highway. Oh, got to switch to the...
You then transfer or translate, your test pattern to the IFW texture.
Well, once I've got this thing set up in here,
Yeah.
I just go to Surface Editor. Now I won't be able to see the IFWs in
Right. Yeah.
here. I'll turn that on. I can actually even do it just with any of these 2D images can also be UV mapped. So I'll go with a checkerboard. Plug that into diffuse. And that's not going to show up, is it? No. Okay, I'm going to have to go to layout for this.
Viper display.
Yeah, I just got to switch it over. I got wrong content folder again. Okay, I got to save this. LightWave 10 takes a little longer to start up. Okay. Oops, put that back down. I'm using the little space mouse to position this. Now I can do VPR. Maybe. Oh. Okay, what's it? Okay. It was working last night. Okay, surface.
What do you got there?
I've actually got a checkerboard on here right now, being planar mapped. I'm going to go to UV map now. Select the UV. Now notice this thing actually has tiles, so I can put like say 5 and 5. Hold on. There we go. So I didn't have to come up with any fancy image maps to do bent grid texture. As I said, any one of these things can be used to do that. Just pick UV map, texture, set the tiles. Now I've got bricks going along there, so now I have a brick road. Oh. And that was all just set up using that little test dot to, position my UVs. And none of the 3D textures will let you do a UV mapping, but these will do it. And when you get into IFW textures, there's a lot in here that will actually let you do that. Like most of the space, or sorry, the tiles. Take any one of these things. See a UV projection here.
Did you have to use the plugin Spider to make it work?
It's the easiest way to do it, and UV Spider comes with LightWave, so you've got that. Like I said, there's another one called UV Creeper that Ken was showing a couple months ago, which will actually do like multiple bands, and it'll do it all in one shot, and it'll keep all the spacing correct, so you don't have to go through it and adjust it. But every once in a while you'll sit there and you know what, I'm just going to adjust this one little area. So you select the polygons on that specific part of the surface and just adjust them in the UV. But yeah, all these frames were done the same way. So these are all that UV, the IFW2 rivets texture. These are actually modeled, but all these are all just procedural textures.
So on the IFW2 rivets,
Yeah.
it comes in as a single rivet, and then you can rotate.
Well, it's tiles. Each one has a different rotation on it. So it tiles just like I showed you before with the image when you have the tiling turned on. But the difference between the image is each tile in the rivets texture is randomly rotated. It has like little variations, and the rivets texture also has a setting for how many rivets you actually want to have rendered. I'll pull that up here. Tiles, no, panels. You go in here, you can say how big each rivet is, the rivet bevel, rivet slot, how many of them are actually going to be used, and how many are in each tile. So I would set that down to 1 and have it centered on each one of those original dots. Yeah, it's probably a problem. Now it's also got little settings that are on all the other panels where you can have them kind of jittered around, so you see these little corners. You just take that down to 1 and now everything lines up. Where's the slot? Rivet slot, you can turn that on, and now you can see how every rivet's randomly rotated. So you just say what thickness you want for that. It's too bad it doesn't have another slot so you can do Phillips, but the rivet distribution, you bring this down and some of them start to disappear. And again, this is just how many are in each tile. Oop, don't want that. So I'll go back to the default of 8 and you see just little squares of everything. And these will buttons, just say, well, do I just want the corners? And put uprights through the middle, diagonals, center rivet, or just do them all. Let's go back down to one rivet. The rivet bevel is just doing that little shading that represents your bump. If I throw the bump in here, you'll see that a little better. So I use the right one. So I take the slot out. I'm going to make the, yeah, you see those are very pointed little rivets. I'm going to turn that texture off here. So now you're just seeing the rivet pattern itself. Exaggerate it. So what I was doing with that other texture, it was actually a function, or as IFW calls them, waveforms. But they're basically the same thing as the LightWave functions. I was using rounded. So I take this in here, and it makes the texture look a little bit more rounded now. And what I did was I actually just shifted the thing over a little bit. And repeat. Scale that up a bit. So what I've just done is I've taken the bump, which is normally just a straight line across this grid, and I've reformed it so now it's got this nice little rounded thing, which gives a nice little groove where this point goes down. The bump looks like a groove in here now, and that's how I was doing the screws on the front of this. Let me get back to number 29. See, each screw has a slight socket around each one. So all that was done with just, basically these two nodes. But let's map this guy along the UV. Actually, he is. Okay. Can also repeat the textures here. It's kind of silly. You got UV repeats here, and you also have tiles down here. But this is actually kind of handy. Because your rivet pattern down here, it actually, if you put more than 3, you start getting that little gap in the middle. Where this, it actually tells you how many times that's going to go. Now I don't think Viper's actually rendering the UV here. So let's just render this. There we go. Bring this back down to 1. Put a rivet slot on there. There we go. And we got screws. So if we go back to Modeler, look at that ball turret again. Now just look at some of the other UVs for this thing. That's actually doing a screw thread. It's going to be kind of hard to see. So I'm going to just select one of these guys, select connected. So yes, with this, I've actually got a texture of threads on here. Again, it's not going to show up unless I actually render it, but it's gun bolt, surface. Find my image. Oh, I'm using ribs, so I'm not going to render that at all. What I want to do is find a wire mesh. UV, screw threads. You'll be able to tell very slightly that those things are actually spiraling around. So basically, a quick way of doing screw threads, just use horizontal lines, shear your UV like that, and that's fairly easy to do if you just use the shear tool. Go to modify shear, and just try that again. Drag out with the right mouse button, this little tool here, and you can shear your UVs. So now it really exaggerates that spiral on there. To make sure it tiles perfectly, you make sure you just shear it like 0.5 or 1 meter. Bring it up to another 0.5 here. It should work fine. Any questions?
Are you going to talk about UVs and sub-heat objects and information?
Avoid them when you can.
How about when you can't?
They're a pain in the butt. An example, if I go back to, oh, I don't have my box anymore. Okay, let's kill that. Box. Okay, just going to atlas this guy again. That's just a speedy way of doing it. Go back to that surface. UV, that was texture 1. Pull up that dot. Actually, I'll just put the rust rock on there. Okay, problem with UV. Oops, let's try that again. I got Catmull's on. Yeah, when you're doing UVs with sub patches, you start running into weird problems like this where your points are way over here. Keep switching between modes when you're dragging the point around. So you're always guessing. And of course, as soon as you move another point.
Could you use a different map for this example, something more like the checkerboard? Because
I could.
I was also seeing deformation in the image that you mapped onto. Let's say you
Right.
want to map on a label.
I have an app.
Lines.
Good. That's my UV tester.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm trying to grab that middle point and I can't see it. But it's very hard to get anything lined up with the UVs in subpatch mode. Because as soon as you let go, it
Additionally,
snaps.
I had it in subpatch and it's like, all right, this is just not working. But additionally, the object in question also needs to get endomorphed from position A to position B.
Right.
And somewhere along that trip, the UV also got squiggly.
Yeah, that's going to happen with UVs and morphs. Make sure you're on your base when you're doing your original UVs.
Right, looks great at the base. But then you get into the morph and it's like, oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah, you try not to morph the stuff too much.
Yep.
Yeah, Catmull Clarks probably handle it a little different. Oh yeah, they don't do them in Catmull Clarks. They don't like to show up too much. That's weird that it actually separated like that. Oh, yeah. Because I had them selected. Yeah, if you can, avoid it.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you do it and then freeze the geometry and then test it?
It's a little bit harder to do because as soon as you freeze the thing again, you have curves where you used to have a corner. So you start losing the geometry or the texture. But I have done it with creatures. But one of the things that a lot of people don't seem to know is you can take one little section here. Actually, I'm going to turn off subpatching for now. Going to re-atlas this thing. Or you can make a new UV for another surface. So now I can actually use this to map in another image just for that small area. So I'm going to go back to this, add, copy, paste. Okay, I'm going to have to flip this. Keep hitting the wrong keys in here. So there I've got a nice little label I can see. Go back to the layers here. Make that an alpha. So I've got two different UV maps set up on this. One's just doing the main grid texture, and the other one's putting the label in here. And with nodes, you can actually offset UVs in the node image. Pull that up here. Whoops. Clear these out. Image. Yeah, the image node has these two little offsets, and you can't access them in here. You actually have to do them numerically by adding in a little constant. And you just feed a value in there. Now, again, textures aren't going to show up, like nodal textures won't show up in here. I have to go to layout to see that. So I'm going to save this. And I've got my cube in here. Turn VPR off for now. Oh, helps if I put an image in there, doesn't it? So by changing this value, I can actually slide that texture around. So you're asking about animating UV maps. You can't actually animate the UV map itself, but you can actually animate a texture across it. Just by changing its offset here. So this is doing a VPR preview. I think that's enough. And play. Oh, it's going pretty quick. Let's try one. Yeah, it's not going to show up there. Okay, it's not showing up now. Oh, you get the idea. They notice these also have the offset planks. There's UV offsets down here, so all these 2D textures can be animated that same way. The only problem with you do a texture like that, where one area is a separate UV from the rest of it, you'll get a line at the end of your UV map. So just turn the nodes off for this. Okay, it's not showing up. It should be. Okay, I think it's time to reload. Something's going weird. Should I pull it up in 9.6 and do the same thing?
How long did it take you to texture the whole turret?
About 3 weeks, both model and texture at the same time. Yeah, so these are all separate UV maps for positioning. Actually, no, those are actually planar maps, sorry. But yeah, that's a separate UV map from the rest of the tail, which is another UV map. So there's a little seam coming right down here where I have one UV map for this section, and then I split it, and stretch it another direction to get the longer panels in here, and then split again for the rest of the tail. So these two little sections here are discontinuous sections of the same UV. Okay, so let's load that ball again, or box. Get onto the right content directory first. Content folders. Okay, what is going on here? Okay, turn that off. There we go.
Do you have any experience with 3D coat?
No, haven't messed with that yet.
Yep.
Okay, why isn't that showing up? That's not making any sense. Oh, there it is. It's on the other side.
Yeah, when all else fails, look at the other side.
Yep. Okay, let's turn it back to normal here. Now I'm going to turn off the alpha, change the image to load up something interesting here. Images. Okay, so I've just UV mapped that one little polygon and threw a concrete texture on there. I'm going to show you what happens when you using the same surface across the rest of it. Trying to think of the best way to show this now. But generally, when I'm doing these UV maps for a small area, I take the surrounding geometry and UV map with the same UV name, but I just scale it all down into a little corner of the UV so I don't get these little lines. I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that layer and make it a bump. Kill that. Yeah, course, now it's not showing that little artifact anymore. So I just wonder if they fixed that. Oh, alpha. Okay, let's try 0. Yeah, maybe they fixed that. It used to be a problem where anytime your UV map would stop, especially if you're doing something like labels with a UV or an alpha, you'd still get a square or an outline of all your polygons where the UV map actually ended. For some reason, it's not showing it now.
Oh man, if it was me, I'd take credit for it.
Let's try this. No, I am not seeing it. Oh, well, just barely slightly here. The little dots. Now I've cranked it up to like 7. Let's do some better rendering here. Okay, yeah, that little line there isn't actually part of the image. That's the end of my UV space. So to solve that problem, go back into Modeler. Go to UV space here. Just squeeze those points right back to the edge of the grid. Now I grab those guys, cut, paste, just an easier way of handling that. Give them the same UV map. This is called 1. So make UVs, 1, create. I don't care what they're going to do because all I'm going to do with these guys is shrink them right down there. So now the whole thing also has a UV map of 1 as well as...
And wait a second.
Yep.
That's technical.
Oh, okay. That was a lovely jet. Yeah, so I have 2 UV maps on here. I've got texture 1, which is all 24 polygons, and I've got this texture, which is also all 24 polygons, but only one of them is actually doing anything. All the rest of them are just all squashed down here, so whatever color my image is here, that's what they're going to get. And usually, you know, what you've got in colors, pretty much what your whole surface is going to be like anyway. So now I render it. I don't have that little square around the logo anymore. It's just one of the weird bugs where if you have a UV map on one polygon but not in the next one, it's going to give you a little line. It's usually in your bump channel, but it also shows up in color sometimes. So I'll pick up this concrete texture again. Let's UV map it. Kill the bump. Yeah, I don't see any lines in there other than the edge of the image. Because it used to be like, you know, a fairly solid line, like somebody just took a pencil and drew around it. And now I can copy that, paste it on, add the layers, change that to this texture, bring him down. No, it's still overwriting. Okay. It's been a while since I've done this little trick, but yeah, the texture, this is the one that's using only one polygon. It's still overwriting everything because I forgot all the other polygons in this thing are picking up whatever color is down here, so that's what this is. So it's going to completely override the rest of the texture. So I don't get to see the other one I've got underneath. The way to get around that is just go back to Modeler.